Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to contribute in a small way to your discussion about accounting for sustainability. And I can only apologize for the fact that I am doing so in this disembodied form, but at least it has some advantages for my carbon footprint. Now, you may wonder why on earth the International Federation of Accountants and the Malaysian Institute of Accountants have very kindly invited me to say something today, particularly when matters of accountancy are, well, not exactly my speciality. But I have, for many years, been increasingly concerned that we are damaging and over-consuming the planet's natural capital, on which we all depend for our survival. Experts tell me that even with over 1 billion people with no access to drinkable water and living on less than $1 a day, we are consuming every year 30% more of the planet's natural resources than it can renew. And remarkably, we are depleting and destroying this wonderful asset with little idea of the economic consequences. This is in no small part because the cost of consuming and damaging the planet, probably the most significant cost we incur, has never been taken into account fully and consistently in accounting and decision-making systems. The grim reality is that our planet has reached a point of crisis, with the time for us to act rapidly running out. We are confronting what could be described as a doomsday triumvirate: pollution and overconsumption of finite natural resources, coupled with the very real risk of catastrophic climate change, unprecedented levels of financial indebtedness, and, alarmingly, unsustainable rates of population growth. If we are to tackle these problems, it is vital that we have better information about the economic value of the Earth's ecosystems, about the sustainability of the organizations we work for, invest in, and depend on, and about the products and services we buy and use. Yet, at present, we face the challenges of climate change and overconsumption of finite natural resources with only a tiny fraction of the knowledge needed to make better choices. We account for our income, expenditure, and financial assets and liabilities with great precision. But our greatest asset, the natural capital on which everyone depends, isn't accounted for at all. The starting point in addressing this issue is, of course, to understand why this is the case, to understand why we are not counting everything that counts and measuring everything that matters. Why, for example, can it seem economically sensible to cut down rainforests for agricultural crops, including palm oil and soya, when the ecosystem service is lost? In other words, water to grow vitally needed food, the storage of vast amounts of carbon, and a home for irreplaceable biodiversity have, by any rational analysis, far greater value than the crops produced on the deforested land. A large part of this apparent illogicality stems from the difficulty we all face in giving sufficient weight to the long term. People are mainly judged, remunerated, and recognized by what they achieve today rather than on their plans for tomorrow, even though how we plan and provide for the future is ultimately much more important. So how have we got ourselves into this situation in which the short term is so important and what happens in the long term apparently so inconsequential? Part of the reason is the emphasis that the media and information systems place on immediacy in a fast-moving world, and part is ever-increasing advertising-driven consumption. But, if I may say so, part of the reason is perhaps because accountants tend to feel more comfortable dealing in certainties and recording what has already happened rather than addressing the less certain, broader and longer-term consequences of our actions. As we all know, any outcome which has a risk of not being realized is discounted significantly in decision-making. The future is intrinsically uncertain and therefore risky, with the result that future outcomes tend to be discounted by accountants, businessmen, governments, and other decision-makers. This reinforces our present damaging and indeed very possibly ultimately calamitous emphasis on the short term. So how do we escape this dilemma? Better information has to be at the heart of the answer. Better information about the broader and longer-term consequences of our actions so that what may happen in the future is clearer and less uncertain and therefore less heavily discounted in decision-making. Now, I established my Accounting for Sustainability project back in 2004 to help provide this better and more comprehensive information. And my project has been working to develop the practical tools and approaches needed. Firstly, by suggesting how sustainability can be taken into account more effectively in day-to-day operations. And secondly, by developing a new approach to reporting, an approach that reflects the interconnected impact of financial, environmental, and social factors on an organization's long-term performance. We call this approach connected or integrated reporting, and I'm delighted to hear that it will be an important subject of discussion during your Congress. An increasing number of organizations, including the United Kingdom government and the international groups EDF Energy, HSBC, and Aviva, are adopting integrated reporting. And I'm very pleased to say that in August we launched the International Integrated Reporting Committee. This is a global group very kindly supported by the International Federation of Accountants, as well as by the main international accounting firms, the UN, international listing authorities, NGOs, academics, and others working in this area. The committee's objective is to instigate the creation of a global system for accounting for sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely heartened that you have all come together to discuss these vital issues and sustaining value creation, as it is only through this kind of international collaboration and leadership that we will achieve the change so urgently needed. Many people, extraordinary though it may seem, think that accounts and accountancy aren't important. But information is power, particularly information about money. As accountants, it is your role and responsibility to provide the better systems and information which are so urgently needed, and to show that acting for the long term and in the best interests of communities and the environment is the right financial approach. It should not be considered as just an expensive luxury to be discarded rapidly in times of economic downturn. I suppose that I'm asking accountants for creativity in developing the systems needed for the 21st century. Now, I know that creative accountancy has a rather dubious reputation, but perhaps this is an ideal opportunity for it to redeem itself. As the Native American proverb says, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So, if we are not to lock our children and grandchildren into a world with no future and throw away the key, then I fear there is no time for inaction. And who better to take the lead and set an example than the accountancy profession, which is, in so many respects, the engine room of the corporate world, and indeed government. I very much hope and believe that your discussions over the next 3 days will be an important and practical step in addressing the daunting challenges which confront us. And I can only wish you every success with your endeavours.